Okay, welcome back to lesson 5. Right. The module will be moving a bit faster from this week onwards. Right. So today we're going to talk a bit about job analysis methods. So the class can be relatively fast. Let's see how it goes. Right. Then there will be a e-learning on Friday, right, that you can access from Friday morning onwards. Then you have give you one whole week to try to go through the materials and complete some of the questions. Right. Then the next week will be lesson 8, then it will be another few lessons before we have our e-learning again. Right. So I'll be scheduling open sessions for during e-learning for me for any check-in regarding your coursework if you like to. Right. So I already seen quite a few of you. I haven't announced, but you already go up and selected your slots for the coursework. Right. So later on I will share a bit more about that. Right, so today we are actually going to a quite a specific topic. It is a topic that is usually more relevant to HR professionals, right? Actually, not just HR professionals, but the people that look at this the most will be HR professionals. But there are also other people looking at this as well. But we are trying to understand it okay from the organization point of view, similar to what we talked about last week. But then see how, as career coaches, career counselors, how can we use our understanding of the process to help our clients. Right? So that's the purpose of the main aim for today's lesson. So before we go into the main lesson, I'll just do a quick recap of lesson 4. So lesson 4, it was sort of like a mismatch of three different topics, but they are generally related to understanding, right? When we talk about the labor, supply, and demand, right? So what comes in? So as an organization, the process of people coming and leaving the organization, right? Is one aspect of the flow of labor, right, through an organization. So we talk about generally as an organization, how do they look at, right, what are the people that they need? How many people do they need? Right, for what kind of time horizon, right? And how everything relates to the business objectives, right? Which is important. And we know from a bit of discussion that the business objectives can be um, related to larger external factors. So if there are certain things that affect either the whole economy, certain particular sectors, then you expect that the businesses will react and respond accordingly and formulate some business strategy that will have some downstream impact on how they may look at, right, their manpower needs. Or if they cut down, they may increase, right? So I mean, we also talk a bit about in the recent news. There's a lot of such. Uh, we see quite a bit of news of such manpower. Uh, I mean, what companies or organizations do in terms of how they manage, right, the need for the manpower. By most of the time, the ones that we get in news to, right, cutting down manpower, lah, right. So it's related. So it's not saying whether it's right or wrong, right. There's a business strategy that the companies will adopt that will affect how they look at bringing either hiring more people or hiring less people or letting go of some people, right, or their manpower. Then we went into the different types of turnover. Right, turnover is a process, right? It's a general term to describe, right, when people leave an organization, right? And there are many ways people can leave the organization, but generally, if you look at it at the broadest level, then there's a voluntary one, which is, right, people resign, right, on their own accord, and they probably may be joining another company, right? Then the other big group will be involuntary, usually initiated by the companies or organizations, right? Then they need to let people go, right? Then of course we have turnover that are beneficial, right? When it comes to benefits, whether something is beneficial is always depending on the perspectives, right? So from the company perspective, right? Losing somebody that's productive, right? Losing somebody that is a good, right, employee is always not beneficial. Right? Of course, from an employee point of view, which is if you're helping your client, not from an organizational perspective, right, then the beneficial aspect might be in the client perspective, leaving organization might be beneficial to the client. So the perspectives are different. So it's important when we are looking at some of the topics that we're covering, what perspective are we looking at? But understanding it from different perspectives helps, right? You think about how you can effectively or more effectively help your client, right? Then, of course, towards the end, we have a quick discussion on engagement. We were talking about what are ways, right, in Singapore or elsewhere, right, people can have used to try to retain, right, or even attract, right, people to join the company. As I think I quickly also mentioned, I think I also briefly mentioned that a lot of the things that we are discussing in this module, right, will be what are more common practices, right? What you are, what is being discussed in Derek's module, sometimes you can try to tie it in, right, is some of the theories that would make sense from by looking at some of the things that we covered here. For example, when you talk about factors that retain, right, or attract or get people to stay more in organizations, right, it can be, right, you can see that from a more theoretical perspective, for example, from the theory of work adjustments, right, or if it's a more developmental, uh, I believe now should be this week or probably next week, you will be talking a bit about the developmental theories, right? So when you're looking at some of these theories, right, then you can see it from this perspective on, okay, why do people want to leave, right? So when in our module, we talk about practices a bit more, right? In Derek's module, right, there's a tie-in to the theory part, right? So hopefully these two modules complement each other. Okay, so that's generally what was discussed in lesson 4. Of course, I did also share about the coursework and the instructions. It took a bit of time to upload. I think I took 2 days. Right. The main reason is because there's a new AI use of AI clause that I need to incorporate into the instructions. So if you haven't had a chance to look at the coursework instructions, it's already on Polite More, right? So, and you will notice now there's some additional things in the instructions, which is related to AI assisted assessment. So there's the implementation at Archi level for you all to actually use AI in your coursework, right? But there's certain aspects of, I mean, the scope or the limitations in terms of how we want you to use AI, and you need to make a declaration. Right? So maybe later on towards the end, there's some time I will go through that part again. But it should be the same for all other modules. I'm not sure whether Derek has incorporated it. I will need to work with him to make sure that for his module, so incorporated. Right. And another thing that I also opened actually just today or last week, right, is the scheduling of the Q&A. Right. So for this module, I'm not going to have a set schedule for all of you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up time slots, right, on the 2 days that are set aside for Q&A, right? So each of you will be given about 10 to 15 minutes, right? So you can find the link to select the slots that work for you on Polite More under the course instructions folder, right? So it's a Calendly link, right? So as of, I think, just before the class start, I already got quite a few, so I think many of you already saw it, right? So I think I already have 14 people already selected slots, right? So once the slots are selected, means it's all gone, right? So if you go through the thing, it should be enough for everyone. I think I opened up close to 60 slots, so it should be enough for everyone, right? So if really the slots are not working for you, then just reach out to me. Well, I will send out another announcement again on this. I wanted to share today, but a lot of you, actually quite a few of you already look at the slot. Okay. So for today's class, as I say, is one class focusing on job analysis. Right. So job analysis, some of you may be familiar, or at least I think most of you will be familiar with the outcome of a job analysis, right? Which is usually what we call a job description or job specification, right? So how do people write, right? If they follow more or less the process that we're going to talk about today, then they will end up with a good job description and a good job specification. And of course, as we have discussed so far in our earlier classes, and I believe also in Darren's class, because of the very fast changing nature of the labor market now, right? See some of the things that are traditionally considered good way of doing things, right? May have uh, have been undergoing some changes, lah. The introduction of perhaps Gen AI, right? Introduction of not introduction, but the increasing prevalence of looking at certain things when people are looking at hiring, right? So it has changed a bit of the perspective on some of the more traditional view of job analysis, right? So we try to cover a bit of that, but perhaps not everything. But of course, as I said, today's class probably will finish a bit faster, right? Then if we have a lot more discussion on this part, right, then we can definitely have a bit more time to discuss this towards the end. Okay, let's talk about job analysis. Right, so as the name implies, is to analyze a job, right? So like I said, there's a few aspects to this, how the technology, how fast changing labor market trends may have has affected this, right? So the fast changing labor market trend would have impacted traditionally how we understand what a job is, right? So it has become a bit more fluid, at least a bit more responsive.
Hi, you got class or not?
Someone is talking? Someone question? Okay. Okay. So of course the analysis part, the traditional way of doing this is quite painful. I have done exercise before, although not for recruitment purpose. Again, it's healthcare setting, right? I'm not sure how many of you have done this before, but if you have done some form of hiring, right, you probably have done a bit about on this, or if you are in charge of certain functions in HR, or you have been in certain functions in HR, where you are helping hiring managers to craft job description, or at least look at career pathways. You probably have done some of the process that we're going to parts of the process that we're going to discuss today. Right, so there are a few things that you want to look at, right? So if you look at job analysis, the green box, but there are a few aspects to it, right? So the more important thing is, okay, when in every organization, when they hire somebody in do something, right, these people that they hire, right, in their job, you have some tasks that they will need to perform. There's some duties, there's some responsibilities. So in general, we call this the TDRs, right? So these are what employees are doing on a day-to-day basis based on what they are hired for, right? Sometimes some of these tasks, duties, and responsibilities may be very clear. Sometimes it may be not so clear, right? A bit fuzzy, right? So the process of converting that, right, into a good description of what the job entails, right, is which is the job description, right, will involve job analysis, right? And the job analysis will provide, right, a few information, or the job description then will allow you to look at the job itself to see actually, right, if this is the job, right, as much as we can try to describe it, then are we able to identify, right, the different types of characteristics, right? And generally, we use the broad term KSAOs, right, to describe all the things that an employee will need to possess to be able to do the task or fulfill the responsibilities and duties effectively. Right. So there are two aspects to this. So when you put this together, then you'll be able to identify, right, what the job is, and what are the skills or what abilities or what attributes or that would be desirable or essential to perform the job effectively. But of course, in the larger picture, right, this may not be visible. Right? So I think job description might still be visible to job coaches, even if you're not from the company, but job structure, right? Generally within a company, how is the job being organized? There are certain frameworks that we look at. So this one is something that we look at towards the end, right? Of course, certain companies will adopt a slightly different way of looking at how jobs are structured within the company. Right? But having some understanding of this allows you to have some way to or some information about what are possible career paths. Right? And in Singapore, there are some resources, they are industry specific. And I think we talked about this in earlier classes called industry map. And we'll look at it in one of the exercise towards the end. So when you do this entire process, very tedious process, right? So how is the output being used? Right. So again, from the organization perspective, right, who should we hire? What kind of training should we be getting people to do? How we prioritize them? Right. The information can be used for individual, right, reporting officers or supervisors to engage in the performance conversation with the people that report to them. Right. The job description would, to a certain extent, right, determine, right, certain benchmark in terms of compensation, right, how much a person is paid. Right. Of course, there are other aspects to this, and there are legal implications as well. So this is the entire picture. We'll focus only on parts of it, right? Primarily at the start, a bit on job analysis, and we cover some of the key things in the job description, job specification, ASAOs, and then a bit of job structure, right? So this is really from a perspective of a company, right? Right. So as I mentioned earlier on, it's the process of identifying, right? The first step, the duties, responsibility, and task, right? Then how you determine, right, what kind of people you need, right? And for these people, what are the skills they need, what are the knowledge they need, what are the any form of aptitude or disposition they will need for them to be able to perform, right, the tasks, the duties, and the responsibilities, right? Like I said, generally HR working together with hiring manager are the people that do most of this function, right? But there are other people that may do this. Like for myself, I wasn't doing it when I did this exercise previously. I wasn't part of the HR function, but it was part of a larger, right, career development initiatives. Right. So if we have time later, we can talk a bit about it. Right. So what we as career coaches and career counselors will know is the output. Right. If we can make some guess on the inputs, not inputs, the process that lead to the output, then we can have some sense, right, how can we help clients. Right. So we'll talk about how career coaches can come to the picture. Right. So if you are first time seeing this, this is sort of like the life cycle of HR. Right. So similarly driven by strategies and the organization level, then you understand the job, design the job, then use that information to do some form of planning, forecasting, then of course recruitment, selection. So this is the standard, not I would say standard, but the usual functions that HR will do, right? Recruitment, right? How do we select? Can it be internal? What kind of training they need to go through? Evaluation, performance, like compensation benefit, of course, generally career management, which is it's an important function, but not all companies, especially small ones, do this, organizational career management. So job analysis is actually at the start. Actually, it's not really one linear trend, not linear process. It definitely will have some iteration along the way. Right, if we go a bit into the details, right? So why do you do job analysis? Right, selection. Right, how do you actually communicate who are the people that you are looking at to join your company? Right, so that's the part where you need to use a more systematic way to determine all this information. Right, if you have somebody who joined or new, or somebody who already is in the company but they are taking on a new job, right? Right. That the outputs of any job analysis also allows you to identify all the training needs. Right. So if you are in a particular job, for example, for for myself, right? So if any, I think some of you also fellow polytechnics lecturers, right? So when you join, right, so they will have to go through some training, right? And how do they decide what kind of training you go into, right? So they have a sort of a job analysis style and they map out the competency model of a polytechnic lecturer who teaches the daytime classes, the PT or the CET. So they have slightly different competencies. Then you go through that training to make sure that you do are trained in that before you can actually uh, be deployed for teaching, right? So the job analysis will help determine what is the work like and what are the skills needed. And if you already have some prior training, they can actually recognize it. If not, everyone will have to go through the same training, right? So that is when you join a company. Of course, even when you're a company, right, it also allows you, job analysis also allows you to see what's the next step. Maybe this is something that you want to go on, especially if there's a job structure in the company and there's some form of career pathway or career progression, right? So selection, training, right? Of course, performance appraisal, right, allows you to use the information to look at standards, right? What are the jobs? Are you doing your job? Are you performing your tasks and duties? Right. The clearer the job analysis output from job analysis is, the easier it is for them to be used, for this information to be used, right, in performance appraisal, right? Start. Most of you will be very familiar with this, setting goals and objectives, right? If you are finding yourself, right, having a set of job description, but the performance appraisal is totally different from a job description, when there's a need to really re-examine what your job is actually about, right? So it's really clear so that it makes that information actually will be used more productively for performance appraisal. And of course, determining compensation at what level you are, of course, compared to external benchmark as well, right? So for certain type of occupation, especially the entry level occupation, right, there may be certain tie in with your education level, right? But this is, I think entry level may be still the case, but increasingly not exactly tied very tightly to the education level as you progress in your career, right? So the job analysis will determine, right, the different skills level. If you're at a certain level, more senior, more experienced, more skilled, you will be compensated more, right? If you are in a certain type of work environment based on the job description, right, that has a bit more hazard, right, you're also paid more. Right, you've taken additional duties and responsibilities in your work, right? From an individual contributor, right, to a lead, to leading somebody, right, then your responsibility, right, will also entail some form of compensation, right, additional compensation. Right, so job analysis fit into all these essential HR functions. Wow. So I suddenly receive a barrage of the lengthy notification, right? So all of you managed to book a slot already, is it? Okay, that's good. The earlier you can decide a slot, the better. Right, so one of the main purpose for this particular module, right, is to highlight the need for information and of course where to get those information, right, as much as they are available, right? And we know from earlier classes, right, SkillsFuture, the Workforce Singapore, and of course there are new incarnation that we're going to see hopefully in 2 to 3 months time, right? They are creating some of these resources, right, as much as possible to help us, right, with more objective information about job, right? So that's what we should be using if you're practicing in Singapore context to help your client, right? Of course, some information is not as easily accessible, right? It might be proprietary, right? One of the example that we shared in earlier lessons are salary benchmarks, right? MOF has it, right? So we saw that simple app, right, online. I think it was Claire who shared it, right? You can select job, then they give you a range of salary benchmark, but there's a lot of other dashboards that are proprietary in nature. They collect a lot more information. You can get a wider range of information. But there are some information, if we stick to salary, that are based on crowdsourced information like Glassdoor, right, where people report certain information, then it's collated. And if you join and you contribute, you are also able to access some of this information, right? So for this module, right, we're really going to focus a lot on, okay, what are the information I look at? And if they're available, where are this information, right? And if this information, right, you have seen this information, how useful they are, right? And job analysis is one of the process that produce one very important source of information, which is the information on jobs, right? How to understand job, what kind of skill is needed, right? And for some of the more recent development, right, when people are using job analysis to analyze, right, using machine learning, right, or big data analytics, right, to analyze all the jobs, then they are able to highlight trends in terms of skills that are in demand, right? Which LinkedIn actually does it, right? So this is how they actually adopt job analysis at the larger scale, lah. So as much as possible, if we are sharing some of these sources of information with you. Now, of course, if you are aware of some other sources that we may have missed out, right? You can bring it up, then we can evaluate it together, right? So like I said, there are resources that allow us to look at information related to job, meaning there are people at SkillsFuture, there are people at WSG who have sort of done some of this work for us in terms of job analysis, has come out with some of the information that we can use, right? ONET is also a particular resource that you can refer to, and later on you can look at it, right? So as I mentioned, right, if you are not in HR, right, hopefully this module gives you, right, a glimpse into some of the functions and the perspectives of HR professionals, right? Because they are very important, as they are the main, for most organizations, they are the main group of people or the main function that will help bring people into the organization through hiring, recruitment. Right? So understanding the process perspective is important so that you can also help, right, your client understand, right, this process and look at what is important for them to work on when they are perhaps looking at some form of career transition. Okay, so as we mentioned, it's quite straightforward, right? Analyze the job, right? But there are different approaches to analyze the jobs, right? Basically, you break them into two, task analysis and competency-based analysis. Most of the time, or maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, depends if you all have any experience, but as far as I know, it will probably involve two types of analysis in one big job analysis. Don't just do task analysis, or you don't just do competency-based analysis. If you're going to do a comprehensive one, usually it will involve both, right? Right. So for task analysis, right, it is the key thing is actually identifying the task. Right. Then of course subsequently identifying what are the knowledge, skills, abilities, and other attributes that can contribute to more effective, right, performance of the task. But for task analysis, the important thing, firstly, can I understand the task? Then can I break down the task so that I can use that to look at what are the knowledge, skills, and ability that are needed, right? Right. So in any company, right, you can start the easiest one, of course, start with a job. If you are hired with a particular job, right? Hopefully the sort of task, the job analysis has been done. But sometimes they may not be done in thorough manner, or they want to update the job itself. So they use task analysis to try to understand it. So very, very straightforward process, select the job. Or if the job is new, then at least imagine how the job would be like. Right. Then essentially a job is a series of tasks. And the tasks are things that the person that's in the job do on a regular basis. Right? So if you have a list of tasks, one job may have 6 or 7 tasks, right? Maybe too big, depending on how depth the task is. Right? So from there, right, the task can be developed, right, either from observation, so we can see kind of these things, doing surveys, right? If there's some documentation, you can look at it. It's very process-based. If the jobs are very process-based and it's captured, right, in some manual, some standard operating procedure somewhere, those are also very useful information. But sometimes we also talk to what we call subject matter experts, right, to understand how the jobs are, right? So this is a list of key tasks, right? It can be very specific. So if you want to be tasks can go down to a bit more specific, right, like activities, right? But usually people don't go down to activity level, right, unless it's a really prescribed way of doing things. Right, then you have line managers coming in to agree upon this list of tasks. Then once this list of tasks, is being agreed upon, then you can start to use them to break down what are the knowledge, skills, and other attributes. But that would be useful for a person to have to perform the task, right, effectively. Right. So this is generally the breakdown. Right. So not sure how many of you have done this before. So I have experience with at least two projects like this, although they are not really for job analysis purpose, but it is generally the same process. Right. So what are the different if you want to break down task analysis, somebody is taking charge of my presentation. Who is that? Is it too slow? That's why you need to take over. Okay, hopefully it's not going to happen again. Right, so you can also approach task analysis in different ways. Right, so hierarchical task analysis, of course, is ideal for complex tasks. Right, so there's order. You do something first, followed by another thing, followed by another thing. There's subtasks. Right, so you can break down the task from larger tasks or major tasks to subtasks. Right, and they follow a particular order or particular stage. Right, so you can use that, especially if the work proceeds in a certain stage or certain stepwise manner. Right. So procedural task analysis, really this is, as the name implies, right, implies that there's a series of steps in the process and there's a sequence to it. Right. So sometimes they may also be a correct order of actions. Right. So it could be if you don't do certain things in certain way, it doesn't work properly, or whatever output that come out for that work doesn't work properly. Or there's some safety consideration to it, right? Or there's some legislation or standards, professional standards that put in place demand, right, that the work do in certain way, right? So this for procedural task analysis, very likely some manuals, some standard operating procedures will probably be in place that you can refer to if you're going to do this. Right. So behavioral task analysis, right, involves looking at how people perform certain tasks, right, and most of the work done, right, may not be captured very nicely in terms of outputs, right, but they are manifested, right, in the certain behaviors, right. So like teaching is something that is a bit harder to, I mean, it's still possible to use other hierarchical task analysis to do it, but the teaching in terms of uh, in class, right, it's a very behavioral task, right, it requires people to engage in particular behavior, right. Those type of work, if you want to really understand it, and if there's a particular way of doing it, right, it will be easier for that kind of work to be observed, or the kind of task to be observed, rather than for people to tell you or look at documentation. Because it might be very challenging to distill the important parts. And so cognitive task analysis, of course, is a bit different from behavioral. It requires a bit more thinking, right? So this probably require people to articulate what they're doing when they're thinking. Right, then you have a knowledge based task analysis, right? a bit more focused on what are the sources of knowledge people are using, right? So it could be that there's external thing, there's particular resources that people do use that they as part of their work, or there's a system, taxonomy, or some knowledge tree that people use, right? When they're coming to do something like a checklist and stuff like this, right? So this type of analysis, right, also looks at what kind of sources of information, right, people when they are doing that particular type of task are using, right? And what kind of knowledge, sometimes knowledge can be, of course, right, residing in somebody, what kind of knowledge are they looking at, right, to when they're doing a particular task, right? So these are the five different approaches, right? They are not mutually exclusive, like I mentioned earlier on, even for task analysis and competency-based analysis. They're not mutually exclusive. We can do a combination of each to try to understand how much a work or type of a job is, right? So the main consideration is usually time. How much time do people have to understand the jobs? Okay. So before we go into competency based, so maybe I can quickly share my own experience in doing this. So I had two experience, a bit more extensive involvement. So one I probably did mention before, it was actually a student project, right? For Mendaki, right? So it was they have reorganized their one of the departments, and they're taking a larger scope, right, in some of the teams in the department, right? So what the Mendaki wanted to do and got the students to help, and I was involved part of the work, right, was to see what kind of task is now required with the expanded scope of work for the department itself, right? And of course, the aim of that was to see, and they're not looking at hiring. So what they're looking at is, can their existing staff be trained, right, to be able to do the new task that comes with the increased scope, right? So for them to be able to think about what kind of training to go ahead, then they need to have a good sense of what are the new work that they need to do, right? So what the student did, right, they did a few things lah. So if you remember that the process, right, so they know the jobs, right? So they know the two departments. So of course, even the new teams. Even though they know new teams, that they know that there are teams that are going to have expanded scope, but actually they're not so sure when the scope expanded, right? The jobs is it the same? Because they don't have really a job title, lah. They have something more related to like executive, right? So executive is the same common title that is being used for entry level executive positions, right? So the same job title is the same, right? So even though their job scope might be different, so the first thing they need to do is to say that is there different type of jobs within the team, right? To break down, or everyone actually has the same job. So once they break it down, they examine job description, right? Because when they have a new job scope, right, their bosses need to write up the job description. So they understand that. Then they had an interview with the director of the unit. Then they interview the immediate manager of the new team in terms of developing a list of tasks, right? And they spoke to the team members that are going to move in to see how much they understand their current work and their new work, right? So it's a lot more interview type of task analysis to understand their work. Then, of course, when they have their list of tasks, they validated it with actually it's all internal. The subject matter expert is the line manager, right? So they had that list of tasks, then they start to break down the KSAO based on both existing competency framework as well as new competency that they identify through new tasks. So that was the work that they did for Mendaki. So that was a student project. Not exactly for hiring purpose, but it was a reorg, right? So at the organization level, they lead to expansion of scope, and they need this work to help them decide what is the plan, or come up with a plan to move their existing staff, right, to be able to perform the new job. Right. So in my own experience, in another context, which is healthcare, right, it was also a task analysis, but it was quite a different problem, right? So when I was back in, I think, maybe 7 years or 8 years ago, really, right? So there was a lot of emphasis placed on nurses. So nurses, if any of you are familiar, hospital nurses practice in hospital, very ward-based, maybe some of them in the clinic, right? So, but there was increasing, at least increasingly, their work, right, for nursing, right, is moving outside of wards, right? So even for hospital nurses, lah. So this, I think 7 or 8 years ago, there was quite a bit of movement to get nurses to go into the community. So if you have seen them before, they are the ones that visit patients at their place, right? Some of the assessment is done at the patient place, right? Some of the interventions are done in the patient's home, right? They may also be leading some form of community health aspect, right? But this is something that nurses may have gone through training in their basic training, but they actually don't really do this type of work a lot outside the context hospital, right? Because the context of hospital is if you cannot do it, right, there's someone else more experienced that is there that can help you, right? If there's emergency, there will be a lot of things around you that can, or people around you that can help you. But when you go to community, you're on your own, or you got a team, a pair, where you're on your own, right? The type of work nature is quite different now. So at the point of time, one of the chief nurse was asking me and my team at the time to actually analyze what's the work about, because they had quite a bit of difficulty recruiting, right? So they want existing nurses to come, but they actually find it very hard to, even they get nurses to come, the nurses cannot perform very well, right? So they wanted a relook of what this community nurses was about. So we went in and did a task analysis, trying to understand. So a bit of observation of what community nurses do, right? A bit of interview with community nurses, right? A bit of competency, understanding what are the competency that they felt was useful, what was not so useful, right? So in the end, it was sort of like a bit of task, then of course related to what are the competencies, right? This, right, inform them who are the people that they want to hire, right? Or if they are difficulty hiring, right, what kind of training needs to be incorporated, right? Or do we what they want to bring training a bit more upstream, right? So go to the school and tell the school that they need to start preparing nurses to really do community nursing kind of work. So they use that output for various purposes. Right? But the idea here is the same, right? They are using job analysis to try to help them solve some of the issues. Right. So again, these are very job organization perspective rather than from the client, your client perspective or the career coach perspective. Right. So that's an example of how job analysis has been done. Maybe before I move on, any questions on task analysis? All good? Okay. Okay, then we move on to competency based analysis. Right. So earlier on we talked about tasks, and tasks have associated knowledge, skills, abilities, and other um, attributes that will help anyone who possess them will perform that task effectively, right? So when you have a combination of skills, knowledge, abilities together, right, then you call it a competency lah. So competency is a bit more broad-based, right? So skills and tasks, everything would be a bit more uh, specific, right? So when we talk about competency, we're looking at, okay, generally when we encompasses this job, right, what are the different things that put together, we can call them, right, a competency framework, and we'll look at them later on. And you are able to, within a competency framework, also like sort of designate, right, whether you are sort of like novice, right, or you're proficient, right, or you are competent, or you are expert level. right? So there are different ways of different descriptors for this, but competency-based analysis should also have some way to discriminate people who are more skilled or less skilled at certain levels, right? So it's if you do have a competency framework, right? So I think for some of you, you may find it a bit more outdated way of thinking now, right? Because competency frameworks tend to be quite so once you put in a lot of work to do it, right? You won't change it very often. Like I said, for the last few years where the labor market or job nature has been changing so fast, right? Competency framework may not be a good a document that is quite static, not live one, right? Would be not very useful because as the job change, then if the competency framework cannot keep up, then it's not a very useful uh, document or framework. So I'm going to use the example quite old apprentice. Right. So competency based aspect is really right to allow you, if you come up with a competency based type of analysis, what are the things that people need to demonstrate? Right. So it ties in very well with determining performance. Right. It ties in very well, of course, again, we back to training and development. Right. Also, with the discrimination of the different competency level, there is very useful also to determine, especially within a particular job or job family, right? What can progression look like if you become better at uh, the competency, what depending on what your framework is, you become better at certain aspects of the competency framework, right? So it gives you some sense of how you can make some progression along the way, right? So this really is not just about what is the competency, but how do people demonstrate at what level, right? And what does it look like when people are at this level, right? So if you want to have a quick visual of how it looks like, right? So you require somebody to assess lah. With the introduction of wide use of AI now, I think the assessor may be taken over to a certain aspect by some form of AI agent, right? So, but generally, in a very competency-based kind of assessment, or after you do the analysis and you have the competency framework and you're using that in terms of assessment, you probably need a assessor, someone who is trained, firstly, his experience, also trained to be able to do that observation, right? So the employee or whoever is going through that competency-based assessment have to demonstrate, do something, do the task, then the assessor will, right, determine how good they are, right? So then they will have some way to decide if they're competent or not competent, right? If they're not competent, right, or they're already very competent, right, what level are they at, right? If they're not competent enough, right, what are the training or what are some of the things that can be done to help them reach the certain that level of competency that they, right? And many of the many of these competency-based assessments, right, after the competency framework is being determined through this analysis, right, maybe the assessment may have to be conducted every few years, right? So it's not once off, I can do it, I can do it, because it's a demonstration of your skill, right? So it requires a regular, right, making sure that you are able to perform at a certain level, right? At least not below a certain level, so that you can continue on your work, right? So this is one of the thing that can result, one of the development that can result from a good competency-based analysis, leading to some form of framework that allows people to do the assessment. Right. So for all of you, right, because specialist diploma in career counseling, right, is recognized by NCBA. So actually, this also they also will regularly reassess whether they want to award us this. So I think every 3 years they will make the assessment whether they want to continue recognizing RP and our program, right? That as part of fulfilling their competency framework. So NCD has competency framework, right? So that competency framework is used to, right, or is one of the main driver in terms of how we design some of the class, right, and the way we do some of the assessment as well, right. So when you complete this program, right, you can apply for this certification, right, certified career service provider, right, and that certification is not indefinite, meaning every few years you need to demonstrate, right. So of course they have their way of doing the recertifying. So it's some form of a continuing education rather than take exams. Right. So it's similar. So what you're doing go through now is actually, right, they have done a competency based analysis. At least based on NCDA model, there are certain things that they want a career coach to be able to do, and they have a certain level of competency, and that's translated down to the training program and the testing framework that allows them to decide whether someone, right, has a certain level of competency. Right. So for organizations, they can do this as well. It may not be a externally recognized certification or credential like what NCD is doing for career counseling, right? But they definitely can use this framework to decide someone based on the competency framework where they are at because of the competency level. Right, so these are the two types. They are not mutually exclusive. Task analysis typically is done first, then competency-based analysis will come later. Right. Sometimes they can be done in isolation. Right. Some work, right, they don't even go into task analysis. They can go straight into competency-based analysis because they don't feel it's important to understand the work as much as possible, or maybe the work is very consistent. The type of work is very consistent, but within a particular job. There's no need to understand the job, because knowing one, you understand the rest. So in those type of jobs, right, they may not go do a task analysis. They will go straight to do a competency-based analysis, right? So something like a nurses in the wards, right, they usually don't do a lot of task-based analysis, right? They go straight because how nurses do the work in the ward is quite widely understood. So they don't need to do that job analysis, task analysis. Right, so within organization, right, if you do get some insights into this, right, sometimes some of this information may be available, right. You can see organization chart, right, how the work is divided, what are the functions and relationship of organization, right. So I don't think all organizations have this, or even if they have organization chart, it is very high level rather than go down. But I think public service might be a bit easier, right? So if you can go to the Singapore government directory, right, you can see generally how each of the ministries and agencies are broken down. So the org chart are there to a certain level, not to the down to the last employee in the company, right? But they have org charts to a certain level. Right. So like I say, there are existing manuals, process flow charts, existing job descriptions. So these are information you can use to help you understand, right, or do job analysis, right. So you can analyze the job, and later on we will go to look at ONET again, and go and look at what are some of the things that SkillsFuture have that allows you to have some information to analyze this, when especially when we are not in the organization and you don't have access to some of this information. Okay. Okay, so the job analysis, if it's done well, right, actually even if it's not done well, right, you should be able to have two main outputs. Right. So one of it is job description, primarily coming from the task analysis. Right. So sometimes the task analysis is not done, like I mentioned earlier on, but it may be entirely based on the hiring manager or line manager telling uh, his or her understanding of what the job is, the series of tasks. right? Then of course the second part will be job specs, right? So this is what if you look at some of the job postings later on, even for your own coursework, you have a few job postings you can look at. This is where they indicate what kind of knowledge, skills, abilities, and other attributes, right? And some other information that they want. Usually, although we are moving away from credential-based hiring, but that people will still require some form of credential information. Where do you what is your lowest level or highest level of education attained, all this information. Right. So how can you get, so if you pull out some of this information, what can you get? What's the nature of the job? Right. You will know for a job description how would the job be like. Right. May not be if you have access, of course, to the organization information, then you have the size of the organization structure. Right. You are there certain attributes that you want in terms of the people to fit their work. Right. Job description may not have, right, but sometimes they are described, like in your job, who are you to, right? The job with other jobs, right? Like qualification, academic background, then where the physical condition or the physical environment would be, but that probably more internal, but sometimes you'll be coming up in job descriptions, right, or your job description primarily to let people know the nature of the work environment, right? Do they need to work in a certain type of environment? Do they need to travel? Right, so some of this information will be provided in job description. Right, so these are the two main outputs, and these are the main outputs that you'll be looking at most of the time when you're helping your client look at jobs. Okay, so we quickly go through what these are. Right, you may find all of these things are quite common knowledge, right? Uh, so like I say, if you have worked in HR before, you have done some hiring before, or you have worked in organizations where you handled some form of recruitment, right? So this is not unfamiliar to you, right? But if this is the first time you are seeing some of this information, right, that's something that you are learning. Right? Hopefully you will see how useful it is for you if you're going to help someone else look at what kind of job they can get into. Right? So job description, right, is the main uh, information, right, that will tell you what the job is about. Right, it will tell you the duties and responsibilities. Right, it will probably tell you what's the role. It will tell you describe sometimes the task. Right, so this has become a lot more. I mean, this is my anecdotal observation of some of the trends that I see in terms of job postings. Job description is a bit more elaborate, and there's some structure to how people write it, at least compared to the last 10 years. Of course, this practice of writing in a certain way is not consistent across all different organizations and job posting. But generally, you see a lot more people writing a lot more about job description, right, in the job posting. Right, and I think public sector is one of the sector that push a lot for this. I think any of the ministries and agencies, right, when they're writing job description, PSD do push for them to make sure that the job description, right, are written in certain ways. So what job description usually have, right, a brief introduction to the organization, right, the department, right, the job title definition, salary range, it depends, right, but you will see that this is the practice now for some of the job portals, right, salary range, like My Career Futures, right, will have this, right, not some other portals may not have this, right, position grade or level, this is something with regards to job structure that we'll talk about later on, right, you have some indication of who they are reporting to, right? If there are people who report to them, right, their information will also be in there, right? So of course the main duties, responsibility, maybe occasional duties, right? Sometimes the occasional duties and responsibility can be a uh, catch-all kind of statement. Any other duties or responsibility stated by who? So this is a catch-all, meaning the boss can ask you to do anything, right? any special equipment used, this will be very important later on when it comes to job specs, right? If there's certain equipment, then the person need to be able to use that equipment or have opportunity to be trained to use that equipment, right? Who did they talk to, right? Will be a good job description should have that, right? So other things not as a sign, right? So this is the catch-all one that I mentioned earlier on. So you should have all this information, right? This is to give someone an idea of the job. I would say that a brief introduction of the organization uh, depends. Of course, it depends also what information is provided. Lah. And I did share that now they are increasingly, okay, not now. Lah. There are some information now that are developed, right, to help you have more information about the organization. Right? Because the information about organizations tends to be a bit more difficult to get. Right? You can go to the website. You can look at maybe the social media platform, right? You can look at annual reports that are published by the organization, right? So that's usually the information. Or if there's some way to talk to people, right? Or Glassdoor, something like Glassdoor, which is crowdsourced. Right? People will talk about the company, their review of the company, right? So of course, you will have to be careful in terms of biasness in the people that will contribute information. Right? But usually organizational information, there are fewer sources of information that you can access. So in Singapore context, they have provided some information about certain organization or employers. Right? So this is in the Singapore Opportunity Index. Right? So this is a more, did I actually talk about this before? Right? So if you have not seen this, I typed the Singapore Opportunity Index inside. Right, we can take a look at this. This is the effort by Ministry of Manpower, SUSS, right, and I think some researcher or people, right, to use some of the administrative data to classify the organizations in Singapore. So it's an additional source of information on for organization. So if you're interested, or you have not seen it before, I put the link there. If you're interested, you can check in. Okay. Right. So next we go on to job classification. Right. This area will have a lot more variability in the type of information provided. Ideally, right, or minimally, people who are hiring should put in information on the essential criteria. I think if you don't have the criteria they said, well, it's very unlikely you'll be hired. Right? If you cannot demonstrate you can meet, right, the essential criteria. So minimally you should have that. But if you want, we can take a look at some of the job posting. Then you can tell me whether some of the information up there is adequate or not. Right? They may also indicate, right, some desirable, meaning if you have, it's preferred, right? But it's not essential for you to have those meet those criteria, right, to be considered for the job, right? So here, right, it should be related to KSAO, knowledge, skills, ability, other attributes, some form of qualifications or credentials, right? That should be in here, right? So of course, some credentials are more important than others, right? So certain industry where the professions itself are regulated, then a credential or qualification belonging to a certain type right, is sort of like the bare minimum you need to enter the industry. Right. So some of the things that mentioned before, doctors, nurses, some of the health professionals, that's what I'm familiar with. So if you don't have the basic degree, then you are not even considered. So you can't join. So not any None of us can just say, I want to be a doctor, then you can just go and have an interview and become a doctor, right? So we need to have a certain credential, right? And the professional bodies then will decide what are the level, or what are some of the credentials that we recognize. So in Singapore, Singapore Medical Council will be the one deciding what are the medical degree programs that they recognize. If you are from there, then you are considered meeting certain criteria to be. Then you can go to the next step of trying to find a job as a doctor in Singapore, right? Or start a business or practice. So that doctor, I think some form of engineers as well, right? Some form of architect, some form of accountant, right? So law as well. So these are some of the professions that credential or the qualification is a starting point. Right? But actually for a lot of other jobs, the qualification may not be as important, especially when we are going into what we call skills-based hiring, or Singapore like to call skills first hiring, right? So why I wanted to bring this in here is to highlight, right, some of the changes like in the way how job description and job specification have been written, and how resume, which we'll talk about in the slightly later class, right? So what are the emphasis that people are putting in terms of credentials, qualification compared to skills, right? It's not easy, right? There's a change in thinking, right? In terms of the change means it's not that we flip one day I flip a switch to change, but over time, more and more employers are adopting certain type of practices that align more to skills-based hiring, right? So what skills first? So I'm adopting this term from of course the discourse that's happening around Singapore. So it has been around for some time. But if you are interested, I don't know whether I put in this report as part of your supplement. Let me see. Yeah, put in this report as part of supplement. Yeah, I did. Right. So if you're interested to read a bit more about this report, which was published last year, right? So it's sort of like an update of things that are happening in terms of skills-based hiring in Singapore, right? Some of the surveys result that IHRP has done, right, with Center for Skills, forgot what is CSFP, but I think it's the Institute of Adult Learning or the or Skills Future, right? So they have a report where they did a survey with HR as well as hiring managers on how they look at this practice, right? So the idea of skills first hiring, of course, prioritize what they can do, right, rather than qualifications, right? So this is really not saying that people are not looking at credentials. Like I mentioned, for some professions, it's impossible to ignore, right? Because the training happens at the school, and you need to have those qualifications before you can actually take on a job, right? But it's becoming less so for some other jobs that don't require particular kind of qualifications. Even you have doesn't mean that you are able to do it. So they are looking beyond whether you have a degree from somewhere, a qualification something, right? So they are emphasizing on skills. Are you able to demonstrate? So at the basic level, are you able to describe, right? If you're talking about resume, can you describe, right? The certain, of course, another level would be if you happen to find yourself in a particular, in an interview, right? So the interview may happen in a certain way, right? Talking about what they call behavioral based questions, right? So we'll talk about in a later class. And some of you probably have experienced or have done interview like this before, where you actually ask behavioral based questions, right, in interview, right, as a way to try to have some way to ascertain, right, the person's skills, especially for more complex skills. Technical skills may be um, assessed by some form of test, right? So they may require to do a particular task, require to perform a series of activities, right? So like for polytechnic lecturers, um, I don't know how useful this is. Okay, so don't quote me lah. It's my own personal uh personal opinion, right? So when you go for interviews as a polytechnic lecturers, now I think previously maybe not so, but now they require any interview for polytechnic lecturers to incorporate a component where they have to do some form of teaching, right? Um, as a way to have some for the assessor or the interviewers, there's some way to see whether the candidate right has some skills in delivering certain content, right? So that is how they are trying to incorporate, right? Identifying people based on skills rather than some credentials, right? So I'm not sure how effective that is, right? Because ultimately you come in, if you let's say that part you pass, right, you come in, then you go to training, right? So it depends on how stringent you want that skills demonstration to be, right? So you will change, right? So based on that report itself, right? At least based on the people that they survey, right? They have positive experience with adopting aspects of skills-based hiring, right? That um, they feel that it actually helps them identify people instead of I shortlist by if you have certain degree, then I accept you. Let's say if you want to go into HR, if you only have HR degree or HR qualification, then I'll consider you. If you don't have, I don't consider you, right? But if you incorporate a more skills-based approach, then you'll see whether do you possess the skill to do certain things rather than the qualifications, right? So although this is something that many people, or especially HR professionals, feel that it's very good, it seems to have some impact, but actually not a lot of organizations have adopted it, lah. But as of the 2025, about, I think, number correct, I need to fact check number 47 or 37. Okay, let me check. So it's about only a small percentage of companies that or not majority of companies have actually adopted this method. A quick fact check. Yeah, it's about 38%, 38% out of the people that are being surveyed, about 100 of them. Right, so it's a bit of work to try to understand skills based hiring. Right, so for career right counseling, then like I mentioned earlier on, you can help client by doing a few things. If you have job description and job specification, right, that will allow you to have a good sense of what kind of skills they are looking at. Right, so really, if the company that's hiring did a good job, maybe they do a good job at describing the job, but they may not do a good job at they may not have done a good job for job specs. Right, from the job description, are you able to help the client then distill what jobs, right? Especially if the job specification is not done well. But if both are done well, then that's a really piece of information to allow you to help you see from a client perspective whether there are really some skills that they can actually latch on based on their prior experience, right? To see. So you don't look at a job based on the job title, right, or the industry or other things like this, right? So you are using whether the skills are available in the client to help them decide. Right. Of course, you can prepare them. Either the minimum one would be a resume. How would you want to indicate that? And I think in later lessons, we also talk about some of the applicant tracking systems that may affect, right, how information that put into resume, right, can prioritize or deprioritize your application, right, in the whole recruitment process, right? How can you help your client think about their applications or themselves from a skills perspective? right? Rather than looking at it from a credential perspective or qualification perspective or experience perspective. And then help them break down and think in terms of skills. Then of course preparing them, like I mentioned earlier on, if you know that certain companies they are recruiting have right certain form of skills-based assessment, right? Then how can you help your clients prepare for that? Okay, so I have an example here. Maybe you all can tell me whether this is a good uh, job posting that has both job description and job specification. So this is a HR generalist and executive assistant. Right. So if you want, you can look at the source. Right. So some of you who are HR professional, you can use your own knowledge to tell me whether you think this is a good posting or not. What observations you have regarding this posting? Anyone?
Hey, Yong Hao.
Yes.
Yeah, Nicholas, I mean, I just go first.
Sure.
Look like Bao Ka Liao. Really very
Gen-
wide range of roles and responsibilities.
It's a generalist lah.
Yeah, generally sort of
Yeah.
like almost everything lah.
Yeah.
Recruitment, events and comms.
Yeah, so this is taken from my
Policy.
career future. So I
Future.
guess if you are HR trained, then you're probably quite familiar lah. So HR generalist, especially if you are from a smaller company. I don't know what's the company. See, I don't know why. If you click on you click on it, probably you can see the company lah.
Yes,
So I will suspect it's SME lah.
Yeah, and actually it's like almost two roles. I mean, HR is HR for most companies. Then EA is like another role. Well, this one is a combined role. Right? Yeah. So it looks like a two-in-one based on the job title.
Right. So if you are from HR, then you probably might recognize some of this lah. So from my understanding of some of the how some of the smaller companies operate, they sometimes will have one person take on HR role and other backend office roles lah, operations, sometimes even finance. But I think this one still mainly HR, right? A bit of operations lah, right? Which is the last part. Right. So it depends on the company itself. So you found it, is it, Glenis? Yeah, so it's SME lah. So you can have a sense, right, how some of these things are. So of course, if you are SME, then how do you think it might have affected how they write the job posting? Anything you see that you all see from what we just discussed earlier on can be improved, or you want to know more about this job? What kind of information would you want it to be in the job posting?
I think probably good to have skills and competencies listed under the job specs part.
Okay, right. So the job specs part now essentially is actually they have a bit lah, but it's not very specific, right? Generally, they put qualifications lah, right? Bachelor degrees in human resource, business administration, or related field. I don't know what is related field. If you're talking about bachelor's degree in HR, if you want anyone from Singapore, then there's only one place, and maybe the public or private universities. Business admin, of course, many places have business degrees. So it's probably focused on people with a degree, right, strong understanding of Singapore labor law and HR best practice. So this is a bit of knowledge, right? So if you have been through a human resource program, you will know, right? Singapore labor law. Of course, you need to keep updated with some of the new ones. Excellent interpersonal communication skills. I think everyone also wants this. I have never seen any job that want this one. Right? Maybe they emphasize a bit more for certain type of job. HR probably yes. I demonstrate ability to handle confidential information with discretion. Okay. Demonstrated ability. Okay. I also don't know how they want to demonstrate this ability. But definitely what they are telling you is actually right, the job description. A bit of a job description. They need to handle confidential information. Right? It's less of an ability as they write down in the qualification. Anything else you all notice about this posting?
I think for me, I feel that they have all the basic requirements of the job scope. I mean, what they are looking for exactly. But as a reader, if I'm applying for this, maybe I feel that there's no personal touch. That means I don't feel that how can I go in this place, or where do I see myself? Like in terms of the team culture, the company culture. So yeah, like I said, it's like a template. So I don't see if I can see myself growing. I wouldn't have that sense. So I don't feel close to this job at work.
Okay, right. So the template part, or it's like somebody is filling out something just to put it up so they can have a recruitment happening, right? So based on what Glenys found out, right, from Rapidity Information Technology Group Private Limited, right, probably a small company, so not sure how big this company is, right? Maybe the HR person at the point which is helping the hiring manager to write this also maybe taking multiple roles, right? Or maybe the person that's writing this is the person that they're going to hire to take over. We don't know, right? So they may not have at least enough resources or expertise at the point of time to come up with something better, right? As a way to get the correct people to get onto the job, right? So probably is it a vicious cycle? I'm not sure. I mean, if they always cannot get the best people, or at least the appropriate people in, they always have issues with writing this, right? Or if they have not go for training or some form of getting more knowledge in terms of making sure that they can get the information out onto their job ads, right? So I think Seth also mentioned something. Okay, which one important, which one is the main job, which one is secondary, right? So it seemed as though like what Nick mentioned earlier on, all the HR role just put it in. Don't know whether so it's telling you that you are going to do everything, right? But perhaps that there might be something that there are certain things that you are emphasizing on, there are certain things that are not emphasizing on. I guess for a smaller company where the recruitment may not be as frequent, but that recruitment part may be smaller, actually the other aspects will probably be a bit more.
How?
Yes.
Yeah, I think this position did not mention that reporting to whom, and also whether is he manage a small team of people. So it doesn't, is something missing there.
Right. So this is the information we mentioned earlier on, right? For job description, it would be ideal to have some information so people not only know about the job, but how are they going to work in the company? At least who are they reporting to? Right? Is it the HR department? Hopefully, it's the HR department, and they're not reporting to I don't know, somebody who is not related to HR, right? So, but that information, okay, it may be not the ideal arrangement, but it must be provided so people have a sense, right, of how that role is situated within the company, right? Of course, as what Glenys did, right, you can go and quickly find out some of these things. If the information is available, I strongly suspect that information probably is not available, you go and search for it. So if let's see if you search for Rapidity Information Technology Group. Cannot, you can go to the website. Cannot even go to the website. Website down. Okay, but they have a LinkedIn, I think. So you can help them look at some information. I believe most of us, right, or most people, when they're searching for a job, they'll go and look up the organization a bit, right? What information look out for, right? It's another question. Whether they go and look at the company, they will go to Glassdoor, right? It's really finding out a lot of information, right? It may be a bit more challenging now, right? So have been talking about uh, fresh grads or even people who are in mid-career changes trying to submit, right, many applications and not hearing, right? So if you are doing it maybe 10 or 15 years ago, every time you submit a job, you actually make quite a serious investment into trying to understand the job, right? Look into the company. Some information may not be available. You have to make a lot of guess, but you try to do a bit of research for every job application. Maybe if you do 10, it's really quite a bit of work for you from an applicant point of view. Right? If you're a career coach, you're helping this person, that's quite a bit of work to do, right? Now the trends that we see in terms of job application nowadays is because of LinkedIn, right? People can see the job, they like it, they just submit. There's not much preparation. They only probably do the preparation when they hear from the employer, the person that's doing the recruitment, right? So there may not be a lot of thought put inside this, or it may not be humanly possible for anyone to invest the amount of time to do that, right? So changing nature of job market, it makes all of these things a bit easier, a bit harder. Right? If many people are just submitting few hundred applications, very unlikely they have time to go and do a bit more in-depth understanding of some of the jobs, right? So I'm not sure. I think for people here, how AI can help, how Gen AI can help, is one way, right? So I guess I'm making a guess. Most people here, if you have to engage in the job search, right, you'll be the one that spend quite a bit of time into each job. Maybe 10 is considered, or out of 20 is considered quite a bit of work, right? So for younger generation, 20 may be something they do in a day, right? Where you spending a lot of time doing it for a few weeks just to look at this, a few applications. Right? So the changing nature of how people deal with in the labor market, but will change some of these things. Of course, having more information definitely is better, and we do identify some information that are missing. Right. So really, we carry on a bit more on job specs, right? So early on we talked about job specs with you, right? Then we talk about job skills first. Then job specs, generally qualification seems to be something that people will put in, right? It's still a signal, right? I guess as an entry level, it's still a good signal. What people are nowadays are going for internship, right? 3 or 4 internships, right? You try to get more signals, but still don't get jobs, right? So it's still a signal to tell prospective employer what you have exposed to, especially in your program, right, where you graduate from, right, as giving out strong signals about what you potentially have learned, what skills you have, what kind of exposure you have, right? But like I say, it's increasingly going down to knowledge, skills, abilities, and others, But you can see a bit of the blank cells in undesirable for skills abilities. But usually skills abilities are essential. Right? So there are things that are needed, or skills that are needed, proficiencies that are needed so that someone can perform the job. If you don't have it, then they actually cannot perform the job. Right? So you can break it down: essential, desirable. But desirable are other things that are good to have. right? But you are still basing it on essential, right? But if you are desirable one, it may give you a bit of edge over other candidates. Okay, so what you're trying to do is to break down some of these things, then you can help the client then see, right? Do you have anything now that can match some of the skills? Are you able to elaborate on them? How can I prepare you in the interview? How can I prepare you in the assessments to demonstrate some of these skills? Right. So, and of course, in the resume, how can you write in such a way that at least you get shortlisted for an interview? Right. So it's really breaking down, right, some of this information in a certain way. Right, so in summary, right, I think after this we can go for a break. Right. So job description really describe the job. Right. A lot of information. Right. Even for earlier on, there's a list of functions, but we are still saying that there's quite a bit of information that's not available. Who to report to? Actually, what the company about? Right. Is there some priority or main responsibility compared to additional responsibilities? Right. So can have a lot of information here. Right. Some are missing, right, in the job ad that you saw earlier on. Ideally, all this should be there because it provides information for the applicant. Or if you're helping somebody, right, the information make the assessment whether they should even consider the job, applying for the job. Right, job specification then will, right, provide additional information or the information with regards what is needed from the person to be able to perform on the job. Right. So education has, I think, is still something that is still that important information, but it's increasingly people are looking at other aspects, primarily the skills part. Do you have skills in certain things, right? And this has like what we mentioned earlier on, right? It has pushed so far, right, until that even for fresh grad, right, or entry level staff with only basic training, right, they are also needed to demonstrate skills that may require them to have a few years of experience in a particular industry, but if they don't because they are fresh grad, right? So there's a bit of dilemma for many of these people who are joining the workforce because they don't have opportunity to get the skills, but the skills are required. Right? So there's a bit of dilemma in the sense that people are definitely looking at skills, but can the skills be obtained without someone, right, being in a situation to obtain them? Right. So these are the two main things. Right. What we see would be job description and job specs usually in the job posting together. Right. The process that we discussed earlier on is the process that will give you the job description and the job specification. And the process is called, right, job analysis. Okay. So so we can take a break now. Before we go off, any questions or any comments so far on the first part of the class on job analysis? Okay, if not, the time now is about 8:08. Let's come back around 8:20. Right, then we'll carry on with the rest of the lessons. Right, so for those who haven't had the chance to scan, I will flash the QR code again. Okay, welcome back from the break. So I see more people being able to scan. So I believe Orlando as well, Lim also. I believe you all don't have any issues with the scanning. Anyone still have issues with the attendance? Okay, if not, we go quickly go through the second part. Right, so it's a continuation of what we were discussing earlier on job specification. So we were generally talking about job specification. And usually for job specification, you have different requirements or criteria that is based on what we call KSAO. So if you have heard about this term before, it's an acronym for 4 different things: knowledge, skills, abilities, and other attributes. Right? Sometimes we call it others. Okay, I have seen somewhere also sometimes the A is considered aptitude rather than ability, but KSAO with abilities being A is the most common one. Right, so this is the breakdown of the specific skills where the employees or would-be employees should have for a particular job based on the task that the job has. Others is sort of a catch-all category, right, of things that can be personality, can be motivation, can be interest, right, can be values, right? So as you can tell, some of our earlier classes and probably in Derek's class, you will see that the increasing importance of this catch-all group called others, right? Because you are not just hiring for skills, which is important, right? But you're also hiring for certain type of people into your company, right? Especially your company have a very specific mission and vision of certain very strong organizational values that you want all employees, right, to be aligned to or exemplify. So it's a catch-all phrase, catch-all group as of now, but they're definitely increasingly important to have some form of assessment in this area, right? In either in interviews or when they are looking at how your resume may look like in terms of your prior experience or how you express some of the motivations you have, right? But as we're going to focus more on KSA, right? So knowledge, of course, is a level of education. Definitely is one level, right? So in Singapore, it's quite, if you have been through Singapore system, it's quite standard. I mean, up to O level, if you manage to complete secondary schools, okay, I won't say O level, complete secondary school, then you have a certain level of literacy, mathematical ability, right? If you pass, right? So if you go on to university, then there's a certain level of writing that you expect from people who have been to university, a certain level of being able to look at, search for information and analyze that information. Of course, there will be technical knowledge related to particular area of study, but generally there are certain level that's consistent based on the level of education, right? So the technical knowledge will be based on the types of fields they come from, right? So that is the skills knowledge part that people will come with, either based on their training or based on their experience, right? Usually a qualification is the largest or the most common indicator to determine someone's knowledge. Right, skills, capability to, of course, when we talk about perform a activity, it can also be a cognitive type of ability. So it may not be physical, right? But it refers to being able to do something, and this ability to perform a particular task is acquired, is learned, or people have gone through some training, right? And it may come from application in a different context, right? Or it can be coming from people who have application of their skills in very specific context, but probably can be transferable to other contexts, right? So this usually requires some form of training. So it's not natural. So nobody is naturally skilled, right? Skill has to come from some form of training or practice, right? So some courses can equip you with certain skills, right? Some skills will be acquired through certain type of practice, right, during your prior work experience, right? But the thing about skill is acquired, and it's possible that if you don't use it, then it goes away, right? So this is the sort of a more defining feature of skill. Ability is related, right, but it's a bit more stable. It doesn't change that much, right? You may not get even if you don't use it, it may not totally go away, right? There's some form of natural talent. So people may be naturally good at doing particular things, right? And certain people may be good at looking at communicating, right? Some certain people may be good at numbers. Some people may be good at working on certain equipment. So these are something that comes a bit more natural. You can call them talent, right? It's a bit more stable. It's possible to become better, right? But it's something that is harder to change very drastically within a short period of time. Whereas skills can definitely be acquired, and sometimes they build onto each other. While certain type of ability makes it easier to acquire certain type of skill, right? Having certain type of skills makes it easier for you to demonstrate certain type of ability. There are a slight difference. So the main distinction is that skill is something that can be acquired, right? If a person don't have a skill at this point of time, right, it's possible the company or organizations can actually invest, allow them to acquire that skill. Of course, acquisition of certain type of skills are quite expensive or cost a lot of resources. So it depends on the talent philosophy of the company, whether they are willing to invest, right, for people to acquire a certain type of skills, and that acquiring that skills, ultimately they will leave to the organization. So these are considerations that companies may have. So to give a few examples to illustrate what knowledge, skills, ability is, right? So knowledge, proficiency, office software. I think generally in Singapore context, if you have been through Singapore education for a better part of your life, at least 10 years, right, you will have some proficiency, right? At least you know how to navigate, right? You may not be very good at using Microsoft Office tools, but you will be familiar how it works, right? You'll be able to know how to open, right? How to type on it and stuff like this, right? So those are basic literacy, right? That we have, right? Working with Office softwares, or if you're using if you're in other fields, you may have a different set of tools that you use, right? So understanding of office procedures, right? So some of this can be, even if you're not working, you may have receive some training at the university that can be used in the workplace, or training before you enter the workforce, right? How to use equipment, right? I think fax machine may be a bit too old, yeah, right? So if you are working in Japan, maybe you still need fax machine, right? But in Singapore, probably no need fax machine anymore, right? So I don't know whether people even sometimes use printer anymore if you don't do any printing, if it's paperless type of office. Understanding of confidentially, so this is similar to the knowledge, right, that we need to have, right, when we are dealing with sensitive information, right? So we also need to, today I'm just going through the training for this also, right? Cyber security, confidentiality. Every year we need to do this training for anyone working in the polytechnic. Skills, excellent organizational skills, right? So this could be something that they acquire in terms of organization, how to put files in a certain, organize them in a certain way, manage them in a certain way, right? Setting up a certain schedule, right? Communication skills, right? So communication skills definitely can be acquired, but sometimes people put it under ability. So it depends on how you want to break them up. If you want to prioritize skills to be a better way to prioritize, because it implies that it's possible to pick up. And people can pick up these skills from variety of places rather than only from particular places. Right? Attention to details for accurately imputing data, right? Ability to multitask, this one, I don't know whether it's possible to learn, or some people are better at dividing their attention. Adaptability to changing priorities, this one may be related to the way how people manage stress, right? Numerical aptitude, right? To a certain extent, I do feel that some people are better at looking at numbers, but definitely can learn to work with numbers, right? But definitely some people are better at dealing numbers than others, right? They notice the details a bit better, right? Customer service orientation, right? So this can be trained. So whether you want to put it under ability, right, or you want to look at it, right, from a skill perspective, right? For an admin clerk may not be as important from a customer service orientation point of view, depending on how much they interact with clients or customers. Right? So this goes back to the task analysis, the job analysis that looks at the job description. Okay, another example, a manager. So this is a really a very general role. Right? All the PMETs that we have talked about previously, right? They will be under this group of people. Right? Knowledge, comprehensive, understanding of initiative procedure. So generally, can I follow rules? Right? Do I know how to convert rules into processes? How can I ensure compliance? Right. So generally, if you have been in any managerial role, you would have this level of knowledge to do it. Some people can't get over how to do this properly. So they always struggle at being a manager. But knowledge of relevant laws, regulation. So they will need to know if they're hiring manager. Of course, you can always rely on HR for additional inputs on this, right? Proficiency is the same, right? Office, right? So some skills that they're looking at, right? Strong leadership management skill. So supervise um, may not be a leadership skill, but supervision is being able to take care of a group of team members, right? And provide some form of motivation, get them to do their work, right? Excellent communication skill, right? There's always something that is in most of the jobs. People will want, right, employees or applicants with good communication skills. Problem solving skills, right? Because one of the tasks the admin manager, right, is to handle exceptions, right? So anyone that's under their team, right, they can run the processes that they have set up, right? But for admin managers, they will be probably the one that some of these more complex issues are being surfaced to, right? Admin managers will be the one that will be looking at some of these exceptional cases, right? So ability, the leadership part is important, right? There's a skill part and ability part, right? So strategic thinking, decision making abilities, right? So it will be how they make connections, right? Uh, so like I said, the skills and ability part may sometimes be a bit more difficult to disentangle. If you want to focus, it will always be good to focus on skills because it's something that is easier, right, for you to pin down. Right? Ability might be a bit more wide-ranging across different contexts, but skills may be a bit more specific. Right, so we mentioned this earlier on, like competency really is a collection of skills, knowledge, right, abilities, right, that can put together, right, for a particular role, a particular job, right. This is one framework that breaks down competency framework into 5 different dimensions, right. So if you want to be a bit more specific about skills, right, then you can and into what we call a competency, a collection of skills. You can actually break them down, right, into these 5 different types of dimensions, right. So you have role and job environment skills, starting from the bottom left. Then you have transfer skills. Then you have task skills, which is the one that I think most of the time we talk about skills, we're talking about task skills. Right? But there's also task management skills, right? How do you manage the job? Right. Then of course contingency management skills, which we will see quite a bit, right, in positions that require, right, a bit more managing, a bit more managerial, a bit more leadership role, right? Or it's certain type of job where their main thing is to handle contingencies, right? So the task skill is the one that we usually look at when we talk about skills. Right, task management skills related to managing different aspects of the task simultaneously. So it's a bit like management, time management, right? Arranging certain information in certain ways, right, so that you can do the work or the task properly. So these are sort of higher level type of skills that look at how you manage the task, right? The contingent management skills look at how people deal with non-routine, right? So this is something that managers are usually will require this skill to be able to handle some of these exceptions, right? So may not always be the case, right? So but you need somebody where some of these exceptional issues can be escalated to, right? So for certain type of work, they also may require this kind of skill, right? So jobs and tasks like more likely to be defined, right? So most of most jobs would have highly defined tasks where I will do it mostly in the same way, right? Repeatedly, and I'll get better at doing it, right? But there's certain aspect of the maybe 10%, 20% of the time or the work is related to non-routine, right? Things that you don't anticipate, but you need to try to manage it, right? But if the proportion generally of the work, right, is requiring them to handle a lot of unexpected situations, right? We do have some jobs like this, especially those emergency ones, right? So um, like firefighters, right? So their work, if they do need to be activated to go and handle some form of crisis, right? So it's usually non-routine. So the work may not be every situation will be slightly different, right? There's some danger with regards to that situation, right? You can't plan for that work to happen. When it happens, then you need to be activated, right? So the kind of skills will be quite different, right? They probably will not be handling unexpected situation every day. Hopefully not lah, right? Or very big non-routine type of work that quite different from majority of work that they do, right? So they usually would space the occurrence of this work will be a bit more spaced out, right? But it's unexpected, not planned, right? So you require a bit of quick thinking, problem solving on the spot, right? The role and job environment skill, right? With how they work in a particular environment and with other people, right? Transfer skills are work where are skills where you are good at looking at people are good at looking at how they can move, right? Working in one context, right? Using the skill in one context, right? To move it to another context, right? So this is important, right? Sometimes I mean in this role we call it transfer skills, right? In some other framework like the ones SSG has been pushing for some time, this may be called some of the what you call core skills, right? So there are skills that are transferable across different contexts, right? And these are the ones that you can help the client actually identify. Even though they may be going into a new industry, a new type of job family, but you may be able to help them identify some of these transfer skills, see whether they are applicable to the other job. Okay, again, some examples, right? Quickly, right? Nurse is the one that I'm more familiar with. Maybe you look at bus driver, because also always not enough in Singapore, right? And always a lot of people also have some complaints about bus drivers, right? So of course the task skill, the main thing for a bus driver, right, is to be able to operate the vehicle that they are supposed to drive in. So in Singapore, buses are big, so they could be single deck, double deck, right? So now what other the long bus are still I think still around, maybe fewer now. Probably I only see SMRT buses. I don't see it in SBS buses. Right? So SMRT buses still have a long one. So they are able to do it in a safe manner. Right? Right? Are they able to so the task management, other than driving, they also need to have a few things, right? They need to try to keep as close as possible to schedule, right? You need to know how to assist boarding and alighting of certain passengers, right? So contingent management skill. So very unlikely to happen, but in a scenario where the bus cannot move, some emergency happen, do they know how to handle it? Right. So some of this can be expected but not planned. Right. So bus breakdown, you can plan for it, but you don't know when it will happen. So but they need to know what to do. Right. If there's a passenger going up to them to tell them that something illegal is happening or they get molested, right? Do they know what to do? Right? So these are contingent management skills. Probably a lot of communicating right? Making on the spot, making a judgment on the spot whether certain actions should be taken. Right, so the role and job environment skill, I mean, if they're operating on Singapore routes, then you need to know the traffic. Right, so ideally driving skills is not just for bus, right? Large bus is what? Class 4 license, right? I also forgot what the class. Yeah, so bus will be a class 4 or class 4A lah. So they probably would be able to also handle other forms of heavy vehicles, right? So something that they can do. They may also, I don't know whether it's possible that if they are quite skilled enough to be able to supervise someone or actually even teach someone, right, to be able to do this, right? So you can break down some of these skills along this dimension of competency. So as a bus driver, then this is a complete set of things that hopefully they can have. So when you are hiring, right? So for bus drivers, if you are hiring or someone want to become a bus driver, I think minimally there's some credential. You need to have a class 4 license. You need to have a class 4 license minimally. Then you might be trained to handle certain type of vehicle. That one depends on where you go to. At FMRT, you have to learn how to operate a very long one, right? In SBS, maybe more double deck type of bus, right? So the rest may be able to do it during your training, right? But most people, if they're not a bus driver or they have not done similar work before, they are unlikely to have a skill, right? So a lot of the skills probably will come from training, and I believe SBS or even most of the public transport company when they're hiring for drivers, right? I don't think they're very picky lah. Once you meet the minimum requirement, they will want to hire you because there are always not enough bus drivers to go around. Okay, so now we come to activity 1. There's a job description, right? So I just wanted you all to pick up each of this information, right, and group them based on the competency model that we have, right? So for the interest of time, I'll just do this relatively quickly lah. So hopefully we have some time for the last discussion lah. Right? So you have a sales manager, these are responsibilities, it's the requirement. Right? Managing organizational sales, meeting plan sales goal, setting individual sales target, sales team, tracking sales. Right. So essentially, it's how do you get a team of sales people, right, to do the sales a bit more effectively, right? Of course, a bit of business development as well, right? So requirements, bachelor degrees, experience in planning, experience in customer relations, right? Experience managing, directing a sales team, right? Excellent written and verbal communication skill, dedication to provide great customer service, ability to lead a team. So there's a bit of ability and skill here, and of course the knowledge that based on the qualification. Right. So like I say, I'll just go quickly lah. Right. So from a sales manager, I think what is important, the main thing, right, is to come up with helping the team come with some way, right, to focus their work, right, depending on what they are selling. Have information on what they are selling. Okay, don't have only know that it's a small growing company, right? So we don't know what they're selling, right? So this will determine how you want to do the strategy, right, in terms of sales. I don't know how many of you doing sales maybe you can share a bit about some of these aspects. I am familiar with some aspects of sales, but not a lot. I haven't been in a sales job before, right? So definitely the sales strategy is important in terms of where they want to dedicate their resources and effort, right? So that's where the sales manager comes to the picture, right? The task management skills, right? Essentially is if once I have the strategy, right, how do I get my team then to together, right? So to be able to implement those strategies, right? The contingency management skills, likely most of the time I think sales manager may not need to directly work with customers, but if their sales teams have an issue, then that is something that they may escalate up to the sales manager to manage, depending on the product that they have. Right. So I now suddenly I recall a very funny video. I don't know whether you all seen this before. This American show, it always pop up in my YouTube whenever I'm looking at it. I think Fresh Off the Boat, right? It's about this Asian family, right? Then that particular scene I remember, right, is this customer relationship management, right? The couple, Asian couple, right? They bought a car, then I think they go back to the agent, then they wanted to rebuy it again at a much lower price because it's supposedly a used car or something like that. So they talk to the person, then the person says, "Oh, I'm the manager." Then they were saying that can we get a lower price or something like that. Then ultimately they keep escalating up higher and higher. Then of course the main laughing point in that show is that the Asian couple knows that the person that they're talking to is not the manager because they cannot make the choice, make the decision. So they keep escalating until they go up to the highest level, the boss of the car dealer. And that show that it was played by Shaquille O'Neal, if you know this person, famous ex-basketball player. Right. So manager definitely will need to handle some of these things. If their sales team cannot handle it, escalate with them. Right. Verbal and communication skills, definitely working with their team. How they communicate with the team, how they communicate with the operations and everything, right, on some of this information. And transferable skills, if they are able to combine a sales team, likely they can combine another sales team, right? Probably they can combine or lead another team that is not sales, right? So these are skills that are transferable, right? Or what we call core skills, right? So I quickly go through this, right? So yes, hopefully some time to do the last exercise. So I probably am going to skip activity 2 as well. Right, so this part is just to re-emphasize. If you have a job description, you have a job spec, if you have a good one, right? What do companies benefit from? Better recruitment. And we look at this earlier on. We know that if it's written well, it's more likely you will put or you will at least attract more appropriate applicants to the job. Right? Then you have a better pool of people to select from. Right. That's for recruitment purposes. Right. If you have a good JD and a good JS, you will have a more principled approach towards deciding how you want to decide the value of the job or task that certain people were doing, and then give a more fair way of compensating, meaning salary, benefits, right? So you are allowing a more justified way of looking at how you want to pay somebody, rather than a very arbitrary rule. But of course, compliance to rules. Actually, this one you don't need to have a very detailed job JD and JS to comply with some of the rules, like Employment Act, right? Whether you are eligible for OT, right? I think there's a certain level of pay for you decided in 2000. I think they recently make some changes, but previously I think the TMET, they are not, to certain levels they are not subjected to this. Right. Of course, some of them are not really legislation, but guidelines that we are looking at, like FAT, right? Really looking at can we justify that there was a fair recruitment process if there's a complaint against you, right? For certain type of jobs, there might be some workplace safety aspects that need to be captured in the JD. We also provide clear enough information to people that are applying that they are working in a particular environment. But again, we circle back to this. We talked about this a bit earlier on, just a bit of expansion about on how this actually affects career counseling. Right, we have been seeing really from an organization point of view, right. So we want to use job information. Right, there are information for us, their resources, right? Individually, you may either the client or yourself may get a series of job postings with job specification or job descriptions to look at them together, right? To try to look at choices or options for your client, right? So they are actually resources for you. In some resources, like the one we do for Activity 3, you have a lot more information together in one place that allows you to look at that, right? If you don't have good or you don't have any job posting at the point of time, right? There are local resources like ONET that you can see later that have job description and some form of job specification at a more general level for you to consider, right? Maybe in terms of exploration of a new work rather than finding actual job postings. So all these are different sources of information that you can rely on, right? So our understanding the process definitely help you see how the organization is looking at this, right? The KSAO framework, right, really just give you a common vocab among yourself with the recruiters, your client, but rather than relying on more layman words to describe some of these things that we are looking at. Right. So specifically, I think it's good. The most important thing in job analysis, or if a job analysis is done and you have a good set of job description and job specification, is to identify the skills and then look at whether there are gaps that client, if they are interested to go into a particular job, industry, job family, or sector, what are the gaps? Right. So this is providing actionable plans for the client. So if they are really motivated to move into certain thing, then where do they need to work on? Where do they need to work on so that they can find themselves going into the industry? Right. So some of this could be initiated by the client themselves. They attend certain training. Right. In Singapore, there are also schemes that help people move into particular sectors. Right. So if the client decided they don't want to move to certain sectors, they look at the skills that they have, right? They may be lacking in certain areas, then there might be some form of training program like a career transition program, right, for particular sectors that allow them to bridge that gap, right? So that we can help them identify those action plans. Right. So this is looking at jobs, but actually even within organization themselves, if your client comes to you, right, they are in a particular role in a company now, but they're looking at moving into other places, right? If they are able to provide some of this information, you can also help them, right, or support them in terms of looking at what are the things that you need to do from the current role to the role that they are interested in, right, within the current organization, right? And I mentioned the applicant tracking system. So some of you probably are familiar. You may have worked on this before, right? Like LinkedIn actually has an applicant tracking system that if you want, you can use it for recruitment purpose. I forgot what the payment like is, right? So many of the jobs are placed on LinkedIn, so they do have a end-to-end system from recruitment posting all the way to managing the whole recruitment cycle, right? So it's an applicant tracking system. Some of different companies will have different applicant tracking systems that they use, and there are things that and increasingly, I think with AI being incorporated in terms of some of these systems, the initial process of screening, shortlisting, right, may be handled not by a person but by the ATS as well as whatever AI that's incorporated in it. Right. So we will look at this in one of the later class. Right. So really is to use that information. It has been around for some time, right? I think for a long time, job posting will have job description. They may or may not have more developed job specs, but increasingly they are putting it more, right? So we hope that we can be part of the right movement to move it towards talking about jobs in terms of skills rather than whether you have certain type of qualification. So that's an implication for career counseling. Before I move on to the last part, right, this is really just a general general knowledge part on job structure, lah. Right? We're not going to go into details. Any questions from the break until now when we talk about PSAO and how different organizations or career counseling can actually use the information? Or any comments? Okay, if not, the last part, quick one, right? Just for knowledge, right? I would say that this is a general framework, right? Not all companies do it in the same way, but they generally will have some form of structure. Public service has a particular structure. If you work in public service, I'm more familiar with public service structure because I think for most of my career I've been in public service, right? So when we talk about structure, meaning within the organization, right? How have they look at jobs, right? Jobs individually, they are jobs, but they are being organized in a certain way, right? Of course, this organization can also extend out of organization to industry sector, right? So the basic thing is actually quite a hierarchical order, right? So if you look at job family as the highest level. So usually, if you're helping any particular client, you're looking at the position of the job level, right? So job can have multiple positions. Then within position, of course, the task lah. So position and task are made up of tasks. Position and jobs are made up of tasks. A collection of tasks, right, is a position or a job, right? A collection of related jobs, there will be a job family. So it's hierarchical in the nature that it stacks up, right? So job family is really a group of similar jobs, right? So moving within a job family sometimes might be easier. Administratively, likely they are going to be organized into similar departments. So that's the department way of organizing a company, but not necessary, right? So some job families may cut across, right? So they have a booklet. So like for my own work, right? So I was doing a bit more research, right? So research work, right? If the job family of researchers evaluate doing those research and evaluation work, right? People do that a lot more, right? So they are job family, right? Some people do a bit more research, some people do a bit more evaluation, some people do a bit more quantitative, some people do a bit more qualitative, right? So the different way types of research and evaluation work. So that as a job family, they are one. They deal with data, they come out with insights. Generally, the insights should open to recommendation, right? They may be involved in setting up a routine data collection or monitoring of a certain aspect, right? So job family, right? But the job itself, it can be a insights person in the marketing department, right? It can be an analytics person in another department, right? So administratively, they may be in different departments, right? But in some some job family, right, is synonymous with administrative organization. Right. So why do we need to do it this way? To group jobs together, right? One of the main thing is that there are certain competencies that are shared. Meaning within a job family, there might be certain shared competencies. So you don't need to have a competency for every job or even position or even task. So if they have shared competency, then you can use that information to help do some form of training planning, recruitment planning, career progression planning, right? You can use that also have a way to do some form of workforce planning, right? Because within an organization, if you know that there are certain groups of family, then you know what are the capability and expertise you have within a company itself, right? So probably more applicable to larger companies, right? So smaller companies may not look at this in the same way, right? So we saw earlier on, for the example, right, with Rapidity, right? If it's a smaller company, it's more likely that you will have a job family. You have somebody who will be belonging to multiple job families. taking multiple jobs, right, in one role, right? So their role could be HR, but they also do a bit of finance, do a bit of admin, right? So it depends on the nature of the organization. So job family likely you will see in larger companies, right? So then another important part of job family is also the ability to allow you to think a bit more broader about what how people can move up, right, within a particular organization, right? So we can generally call it career level, but different places call it differently. So within I think public sector, they may call it job grade, right? In other places, I'm not sure what else they call, but grade could be something that is quite consistent across, right? Job grade, right? But all this that allows you to make distinction between different levels of responsibilities and competency, right? We call it career levels. Some have more, some have less. Some job grades cut across, right? Different types of jobs, right? It's used both for career progression purpose, also maybe for a bit of training and development purpose, right? Or even deployment of certain jobs. And administratively, they may also use career level to decide, right, how the departments are being organized, who reports to who. Right? As an example, right? So job family is a group of job, right? Job functions is one job, then you have job category, so individual contributor. So this is a term for anyone that is working and their main output is coming from themselves. They are not needing anyone to come up with something together, right? Right. So if you are more career levels, so this is an example where, let's say in this company there are three different types of jobs, operation, technical, professional, supervisor, right? Then they may have different career levels. Like, very seldom you have this, right? They probably are all put into one level of one type of career level rather than multiple career level, right? So maybe operational and technical, you have 3 levels, right? So professional, you may have if these are really going deep into particular technical skills, right? Then they may have up to expert, right? If you are doing a bit more leadership role, then you have supervisor, manager, director, right? So I think this is the traditional career level in the company where they pair it together with career progression, right? Within the company, right? The career level indicates where you are in terms of where you are in the company, and moving up the career level is indication of promotion now, right? So not all career levels are like this, but most of the time career levels are organized in such a way, right, to look at promotion, right, in the company, and most of the time is management role. Management, when you promote, you go up career level, tends to associate with taking on management role, right? In certain companies, this has changed, especially those that have very technical type of positions where the people that are in those roles or that job family are not interested, right, to take on management roles. They become more expert. So companies may come out with a separate career levels for them, where they move up, right, not based on their ability to take on management roles, right? So it depends on the organization, right? Most organizations would have minimally one where it talks about promotion that's taking on management role, right? Companies with a different job families, right? They may have different types, right? So I guess the most maybe not so commonly known, but in the armed forces in Singapore, right? I think maybe 10 years ago, there's only if you want to move up in the uniform armed services, there's only one type of career level, all the ranks, military ranks, right? So now they have positions or job families, right, within the armed forces. They are not directly tied to military or offensive type of operations, right? You don't need to have take command, right? They are the military experts scheme, right? NE. So their tasks and functions within the uniformed services or armed forces a bit more specialized. So they have a separate set of career ladders, right? So for each organization, it may be a slightly different one, right? Primarily, the management one is the most commonly seen. Right? So a very busy slide with example of a human resource, right? So I think this is related to the example we saw earlier on that Nick talked about, right? That one executive had to take on so many roles, right? So this is where if you want to break down HR into different types of roles, right? You have a compensation analysis, compensation analyst one, compensation analyst two, then you have a compensation analyst four. So it's a bit of moving up the grade. So their grade level is that. So I guess it's the American example, right? The grade level is 56, 57, 58. So I think in Singapore organization, no, you don't have such fine grade level distinction. Right, so these are the example, right? So of course the duties may be slightly different. You can see compensation analyst 4, right, has a lot more core activity, right? Similar to I think to the case that Seth mentioned, right? So what is the main thing? What's the secondary thing, right? So if you are level 6, right, these are the main things. Although you may be called to do some additional things, but these are the things. For career, job family, right, most of the time also is tied to, like I mentioned earlier, for career progression or career path, right? If you want to move up, how do you move up? What is the path to move up, right? From one position to another position, or one career level to another career level? What are some of the clear-cut criteria for you to meet to be considered for promotion? Right, of course, promotion is very hard to promise and guarantee because it also depends generally on how the organization is set up and whether there are places for you to be promoted to, especially if you are using the management type of career levels. But also depends on the type of budget, manpower budget, and they have to pay more people depending on how they progress. Right, so people may get bonuses, they may get other things, increment, right, but not promotion, right, because there might be other considerations in the future. But having a career family, right, allows you to set up some of this career path, right? So for example, if you are in a finance function, you may be doing accounting. You may start off with, I don't know, staff accountant, then senior accounting officer, then finally manager, right? Or you go up to, or you're more in charge of planning the budget every year, you're a budget officer, then become assistant director, then associate director, or manager, investment, right? So they are in a company, right, setting up some of these career paths, right, will make it easier for people to see within the company how they want to move. Right? So some of these paths can be quite common across organizations. So like I say, I'm familiar with public service. So public service has a particular promotion, right, career path, right? If you want to move up from a executive to a manager to a assistant director, deputy director, director, right? So there's a certain way of moving, right? Of course, for myself, I'm an academic position, so my one will be slightly different, right? So academic positions will be slightly different from management track, but a company, if they have this, makes it clearer for people how they want to move. If this information is available, so in the activity tree, we'll see it, right? Then you can also help a client see is this how they want to move in their career, right? So some of this information may be available, right? Some of this information may not be easily be available. I'm going to skip this activity, right? But if you want, you can look at it. Quite a straightforward activity. You look at 2 job description and try to answer A to D. Right. So I already mentioned, actually we talked quite extensively about job description, right? And it's important, right? You have a clear one, then it's good. Makes a lot lot of things easier in terms of recruitment, evaluation, right? How you can develop an employee within the position and look at training, right? Look at development, right? So a good job description and as well as job specification allows you to do it, right? And we mentioned earlier on that some of the things that we have discussed, right, presuppose that the job labor market or jobs are relatively stable. So if I do this once, I study, I do a job analysis once, ideally the information will be valid for a certain period of time, right? But with more recent changes, technology is one thing, right? The economic factors is one thing, right? There may be some political issues when certain jobs are being looked at in certain ways because people are paying more attention to certain jobs, right? There might be preference for social preference for certain type of careers, right? We mentioned a bit about fractional careers previously, right? We mentioned the other term that I actually I heard about it, but I forgot about it. I learned about it in this week is portfolio type of careers, right? So with the changing nature of job roles, right? Some of this job description, right? Way of looking at job description, job classification, right? May be a bit more inflexible, right? You may not be able to cater to fast changing environment, right? So how can this aspect, job analysis, job description, job specification, even thinking about job family, right, be a bit more fluid, a bit more flexible, right? So of course, one of the things that has been done for quite some time is focus on outcome, rather than focus on how the job is being done, focus on what's the outcome, right? The other development could be that instead of very specific tasks, you have very generic functions, right? Rather than specific things that people need to do. And the how it's going to be done then is determined by the person who's doing the job or generally maybe the person that's leading the team that's doing the job, right? So is this a positive development? A bit more generic, a bit broader, can encompass a few things, right? Right. It's a way to adjust or adapt to jobs being changing very fast. Something that you put down maybe as a task may be irrelevant by next year, right? Which is the project that I did with Mendaki, right? Or my students did with Mendaki under my supervision. I think essentially they are doing the same thing because they need to change the jobs to match the external environment. That's why they need to look at the job again and see what is the task. But I foresee in the next few years they will need to, and next year probably will need to relook the thing again, right? Because it's changing so fast, right? In the end, they may go on to having more general type of job description, but accommodate right, jobs that are changing very fast. Okay, so for like I mentioned earlier on, ONET is one resource you can use that, and there are actually, I think since a few months ago, maybe I missed it previously, but I believe there's a few new features inside, maybe since last year, into ONET, right? So one of the feature is they have a more trending in terms of what are the careers that are or jobs or job family that um, there's a lot more demand for it, right? So if you go on to ONET, right, so this will be the landing page, right? Then you go to the tab right on the top called Find Occupation. But if you click on this, now the first button is what you look for? For Bright Outlook. Right, so maybe I do a quick sharing now. I mean, I know it's at least last year, because if the year before I don't do, I saw some of these things. Right. So if you go to ONET, right, you go to Bright Occupation, right, you can go to Bright Outlook, right. So now they have this more frequent update of bright occupations that are expected to grow rapidly in the next few years with large numbers of job openings or are new and emerging. I think they do have a bit of definition for what, like, every year if the number of jobs posted in that particular job family is 5% or more, then you'll be included. Let's see a big growth. Okay, so you have some definition. So occupations are projected to grow faster than average. Employment increase of 4% or more over the period of this 10 years, right? So they have some projection. Right? So you can see they allow you to look at some of this information. So with barista, interesting. Right. So they have all this. So we have seen this before. Right. So today is really they are organizing it in a certain way, right? Called Bright Outlook. So these are resources that allow you to look at this. Of course, in Singapore context, we also have, but not as user friendly. Right, there are also certain industries that are being put spotlight on. Right, but in ONET, these are information that you can look at. Right, job family, if you are interested to look at it. Right, so if you are early on, you look at healthcare. So these are the different things. So everything here is quite outlook, quite a bit. Okay. One resource. So that is more specific to US, but I believe it's still quite useful if you want to generally look at some of the jobs. Right, in Singapore, we do have industry maps, and I mentioned this in earlier classes. Now there are 38. They are all not at the same place, even though you can go to the SkillsFuture to access this, but they will sometimes bring you to the lead agencies that are leading some of these industry maps. Right? So in the industry maps, they will talk a bit about industry, right? Then they talk a bit about the sector and the job prospect, and they will have quite a bit of job descriptions within that report that allows you to see what are common jobs within those industries. Right. So of course there are 38 industries, it's based on a classification, right? And there are certain things that are a bit more, I think there's a lot more spotlight on, right? They are the ones that Singapore government has at least, right, look at and say that, okay, I think these are growing sector, right? I'm not sure whether there's any recent update because there were some announcements, right? But generally, we know that the green economy, right, digital as well as social services or healthcare, so those are the three growing sectors, right? Meaning it's likely that they will continue to have increase in demand, right? In some other sectors, a bit more uncertain, like information technology and communication, you mentioned earlier on, right? A lot of demand, but also a lot of layoff happening. Right, so there are different industries that you can look at, and I want us to particularly just choose one, look at, right? So I don't have time. I think we don't have time for you to write it out. Actually, initially I wanted you all to have some time to talk among yourself, right? But we should look at least one, and I've selected logistics. Right, logistics are interesting sector. Right, I don't know how many of you are within that sector, right? So we can look at the sector information for logistics. Then we can browse through it and take a quick look. Then I just hear from all of you. Right, so I think no time to get into groups. So we'll do together as a large group. Let me get into the sector information. Okay, you click on the link, you get into here, right, with 38 sectors. So some of them are a bit older, some of them are a bit more recent, right? The green economy with this, right? So it will tell you where. So I don't think they even have a. So I think they have a new one really. So it's a more training program. So if you look at logistics, where is logistics? Okay. Right. So they have a sector information. Right. So this was developed by Skills Future, Workforce Singapore, EDB, as well as Enterprise Singapore. So they are led by these four agencies, but they have consultation with industry associations, training providers. So with kind of sector information you brought to this document. So it's about 77 pages. So we won't be able to look through everything. So let's see, when is it published? Quite dated already, you can see. Right, so I think the most recent one probably for some of the sectors is 2024. But every sector, they will do some of these things quite at different periods. Hopefully they're going to update this soon. You can see the content, right? Skills framework, a bit about the logistics, right? How it has changed. So even for now, it's close to 10 years already. Probably this part may be outdated already. But desired attributes, right? So they'll give you some idea about the essential skills, right? And the KSAO. Generally, if you want to come to this sector, right? Then you have the skills map. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 different general job families. Right? Some of the skills that they're looking at, generic ones, or the core skills, or the one that we call transfer skills that they cut across. Right? So they have some rich information. Right? And if someone really wants to move within this pathway, what are the prospects? All this information is there. Let's see quite a bit. So we quickly go through it. So skills framework. Okay, so different general information. Right? Why is logistics important? Right? In Singapore definitely is one place where some of the logistics hub are in Singapore. Right? There's quite a bit. Maybe not the last mile part, but at least the place where a lot of things will flow through, right, in Singapore. Right, so they give you a bit lah, right, so far on this. Right, and logistic contribute, I think now might be the same, 7.4%. Let's do a quick fact check. Yeah, we have to rely on a quick AI SimStat. Okay lah, based on SimStat. Okay, no, they didn't really say about the percentage lah. Most recent one. We don't have the GDP figures unless we go search a bit more, but 77.4% previously, which is very substantial, right? It's a big share of our economy, right? So definitely a growth industry, right? And they need this kind of amount of people. So in terms of demand in this industry, right, at the point of time when they're doing it in 2015, right, you need about 250,000 people, right? Which is actually 1/3 of about 1/8 of Singapore workforce really. Right, so we have all these trends. You can look at this. Right, so what are some of the things already happening? I believe, right, in the last 10 years, really happened. Right, so what is happening? Right, actually, all these are more or less happened really, lah. Right, and quite in place. Right, so you have some desirable attributes: analytical, meticulous, resilient, team player, responsible. Skills, business innovation management. Can you continually improve the process and come up with better ways of doing it, right? Process improvement, innovation, solution and program management, right? Look at it more not as a series of tasks, but a bit more broadly, right? How to manage stakeholders, technology, especially all these things coming in. Technology definitely is a big role. Right, some form of training and career may not be very updated now. Right, so they'll give you some ways you want to use this information, right? Even for career counselor, you can look at this to see whether you can adopt it in certain ways. Then they have the skills match for 6 of this or 7. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Also it's 10. Right, but they do have the different job family. Right. So they have an example of a person, job description. Right. So all these are tasks within each of these functions. Right. Then you have the skills. And they have the level 1, level 2, level 3, which is similar to so the idea is similar. The higher the level, the more training and preparation you need. The lower, the less preparation you need. Right, so they have quite a few, right? Of course, whether any of this job is still around, right, since 2017, right? But they do have the job description skills. So if anyone is thinking, or if you have clients who are thinking of moving logistics, right? So you can get some of this information here and a type of job family that can be that you can actually potentially see. Of course, these are then you have a bit more executive type of positions. Right, quite a bit of positions within logistics. So now you can have see all the way down, they are all information. So I think I'll just scroll all the way to the back. So we look at salary range and stuff like this, which probably is outdated already. Right. So then they have a summary of all the skills at what level for what kind of category and description, right? And the function. Right, you can see a lot of work go into this, right? Similarly, like what we mentioned earlier on, if this is not a live document, then it's challenging to update this as the industry change, right? So the point goes back to when you have a job, a labor market that changes very fast because of a lot of external factors, right? Such documents may not be able to update as quickly as possible to take into account all these different changes, right? So you have some rich information. But this is 10 years ago already, right? So you can see for certain aspect quite well paying, right? So if you are procurement purchasing manager, I wouldn't say it's very high, but definitely much higher than the median wage in Singapore, right? Because senior position offers higher, right? And how can you move from one position to another position, right? And development. Okay, so maybe I'll stop here for a while, and we don't have a lot of time left, but really just to hear from all of you, from mine, just scrolling down this logistic industry map. What are some of the key things that you think of that you notice that will be very helpful going to help someone explore, right, logistics sector? That's based on my quick sharing of the document itself. What do you all pick up that you think will be very useful? Help someone who's thinking of moving to logistics sector. Anyone?
Oh, actually, I just find there's too many pages and too much information because you just showed us ONET before that. So like there's a page for logistics analyst. I'll share in chat. It's just so different. Like just looking at it, we get everything we need to know at one glance. So in terms of usability, I think that's also really important because the career counselor doesn't know a lot of industries. So when it becomes more technical, then you could frustrate your client if you show them something that is like outdated, or if you yourself are not clear about the job descriptions.
Yes, right. So Document itself definitely is less user-friendly compared to dashboard or interface that allows you to filter, look for information, and only present the information that you want. Of course, you also need to know how to get to the information that you need, but it depends on how you design, right? So for Evelyn, right, I think you correctly pointed out, a bit more difficult to get the information because it's a lot, right? And we mentioned earlier on, if changes are happening very fast, it's quite difficult to keep updated for the document for you to use it, right? So I believe there are some work to try to move this to something like what ONET has, right? So that you can update, then people can access immediately the update rather than wait for a document, right? But the work that has to be undertaken to update it is actually quite a bit, so you can see from the information that's provided. Any other thoughts about that document? Okay, so we did talk a bit about the downside of having such documents. Of course, the upside is you have most of the useful information in one place. So with that one document, of course, 77 page, right? You have information about what are different jobs, what is the skills, what the task like. You have some indication of training, some indication of career path, and some indication of salary. But of course, it's not as updated as we want. It's not a live document, right? Cannot link it to other things, right? What SkillsFuture, as far as I know, is trying to come up with some of these dashboards. They are similar in nature to what ONET is doing, so that you can actually be a bit more interactive when you search for this information, right? But the before some of these dashboards being deployed, then that's the best option that we have for a very comprehensive overview of the industry in Singapore. Okay, so you all can explore at 38. I don't think all of them would have the industry map, or it has been outdated and they have removed it, right? Or they have replaced it with something else, right? Each of the industry maps might be depending on the agency that leads them, right? They will be presented in different way. The one that we saw for logistics is the most traditional one, when SkillsFuture rolled it out in 2015, 2016, right? This is the format. But I believe the ones that are most recent, I forgot which one is 2024, right? Their format is slightly different. It might be online other than on document like this. Okay, I think we went over time. I also hope I wish that we can have more time to look at this, right? But don't want to hold you all back a bit any more longer, right? So like I said, the coursework is already up. So only new thing that I didn't really share is on the AI assisted aspect of the coursework. So we encourage you all to use AI to help you in the coursework, but not use AI to help you do the coursework. Right, so make sure that you read the instructions, and I will clarify it probably in the next class again. Next time we meet online, which is Monday, but we do have an e-learning on Friday. So that's for you all to complete at your own time. But the attendance, you also need to do it on your own. So what will happen, and I will send out an email again to share what the process. During that time, between 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock, right, I'll be sending that link. I'll put it in MS Teams. I will also send it at 6 o'clock, around 6 o'clock through the email. So what you need to do is to click on it on the laptop. So it opens up on your laptop. You can scan it with your camera and complete the attendance taking right on the spot. So it's only between 6 to 10. So outside that timing, if you don't manage to do it, then your attendance will not be captured. So I will share that link during the day itself and the additional email to let you all know about arrangement. Okay. If there are no I heard somebody has a question. Okay, if not, thank you for staying over time, 5 more minutes. If not, make sure that you have the time to look at your e-learning. Then we'll see you all on Monday for lesson 7. Anyone else, if you have questions, I will still be around.
Good night.
Okay,
Good night.
thanks,
Thanks,
Yong Hao. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Yong
you.
Hao. Thank you.
Thank you, Yong Hao.
Good night. Good night.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks, Yong Hao.